Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, sponsored by Vermeer, your experts in hay and forage equipment. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Boyd Quinley. He's the regional manager for Vermeer, covering Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We're going to talk about drought. Before we dive in, I want to hear a little bit about you.
Yep. So been with Vermeer 9 years now, and have I've worked in several different roles. The opportunity to be the regional manager now, and cover what I consider some of the best producing hay markets that we have in the United States, especially from the round bale perspective, where we look at it from Vermeer.
Now, we just talked about an area that I might call the Southern Plains, but it's kind of your Southwest region. Tell me about the hay season from last year.
Last year, I'll say it was a struggle at best. It started off, everybody was positive and, wanting to put up hay. And I'll tell you what, by about the middle of June, it was pretty apparent that, it just seemed like we were missing the rains. And, we had been dry from the winter to the spring. That was the biggest issue compared to some previous droughts. And I've lived through some droughts here before. Everybody compared this one to the drought of 2011. And it's tough to compare one, worse than the other. I would say this one, the difference was that we had such prolonged dryness from the fall and the spring that we were just behind the 8 ball all year. Once everybody figured out that we weren't going to put up any hay first cutting, that's when it really hit home. So we basically took the whole summer off, and then had a few rain showers, some decent showers in August, September, and a lot of people's first and only cutting did not come until that September, October timeframe. So, and it was minimal at best, just because of the prolonged dryness. So, yeah, to say the least, it was not a good year when it comes to putting up hay.
Yeah, this part of the country is a lot of livestock. When I think of that part of the country, I think cattle. What advice do you have for livestock producers who might not have put up enough hay last year?
That was everybody in this region. Everybody kind of was hoping and thinking that they were going to get a cutting, and when it didn't happen, that was the nail in the coffin. When you get into this situation, you've got 2 options, and neither one of them are a good option. You either buy very expensive hay if you can find it, or you sell, cattle, usually at the bottom of a market, because if you're in a drought, it's flooding the market. And so those are your 2 options. Farmers and ranchers, I think you have to look long-term in either one of your options. When we look at that is, maybe not sell completely out of your cow herd, because it took you years to put that herd together. Maybe you call back some of the ones that were needing to be culled anyways. You may even up that percentage just a little bit, to save some hay. But there's some options that we have as far as equipment wise, to kind of stretch that hay, that does give you the ability to take what hay you have and what hay you have access to stretch that, to give you a little bit more of the hay that you have.
Yeah, I know sometimes in drought conditions, you don't get the quality of hay that you're hoping for. The plants, when they're stressed, they go reproductive earlier, so they'll put a seed head on when it's shorter, and they'll start converting that plant energy into seeds, right? And when that happens, that your quality goes downhill pretty fast. So what you're talking about is feed substitutions and maybe a mixed ration, right?
Yeah, correct. Your options when we're talking about there's really two pieces of equipment that come to mind. It is, number one, a mixer wagon, so to feed a total mixed ration, and that's probably the most cost effective when it comes to getting, measuring your feed and getting the most out of your feed. And the second option is a bale processor for processing and feeding hay. And so there's advantages and disadvantages to both of them. And it really just depends on what that producer, how much they're planning on long-term and wanting to invest. Because when you look at each one of them, it really depends on your operation and how you want to adjust your operation to feed that. So when we start with a mixer wagon, like I said, by far the most cost effective. You can buy protein byproducts to up your protein level, and you're talking about the lesser quality hay in a drought to raise our protein levels up, and you get a really good complete ration to go feed your cattle. Now, when you're thinking about that, you have to invest a little bit more into your farm or ranch, because coming from a cow-calf producer's perspective, every once in a while we can get away, in the Southern Plains, just going out in the pasture, dumping it on the ground and feeding it. If we do get some wet winters, which we hope for, it turns into a struggle if that's what you're doing. So you're having to invest in some roads and some bunks, which is all good assets to have. So that's the other thing when you look at it, is you are investing, but it's more for a long-term investment. When you're looking at from a mixer perspective, it's more than just purchasing the mixer and buying some rations. It's actually how you change your feeding operation at your farm. Going to a bale processor, less horsepower, obviously less cost, and those are designed to be lighter weight and feed in a range type, pasture type setting. So not near as heavy. The advantage of just a true bale processor is stretching your hay that you already have. The numbers, I've heard producers say 25%. I think maybe a more conservative number of 20% is a little more reasonable. But even at 20%, you talk about high hay prices. And when that producer is faced with either selling his cattle or buying hay, if you take a machine that could offset 20% of your hay savings in a drought, when you have, say, $100 round bales, and $100 even conservative for some of the hay we saw sell in Texas this past summer at $150, $160 a bale. How much more could you get out of that hay, stretching that hay longer? And then at the end of the day, when Mother Nature does let it rain again and we go back to baling hay, you still have that asset and that piece of equipment to put into your farm or ranch and use, for years to come.
What are some of the other things beyond the equipment? We talked about livestock, and we're talking about livestock and livestock operations. There's different life stages of cattle, so we can think about different choices for calves versus mama cows. Do you have any additional thoughts to layer in there?
So the heart of our customer base is a cow-calf producer, and we have some stockers and some feeder calf guys. But when you look at a cow-calf producer, a lot of that, especially when it pertains to drought, which is kind of what we're talking about, is if you see that we're getting dry, you have the ability to maybe pull those calves a little bit earlier and help the stress level on your mama cow, which is your investment. So if we pull our calves a little bit earlier, backtracking to say we did have some sort of mixer wagon or something, to feed some of those calves and background some of those calves, you have the chance of getting a premium on that calf that's weaned and ready to go to sale. And you also save the stress on your grass, which is your biggest resource, and two, on your mama cow, to try to offset the stress during a drought and save what grass you have.
Now, I'm from the north, and we get snow. So I'm thinking Montana, North Dakota, kind of northern plains, and even up into Canada, we carry a lot of inventory. You just don't know how long winter's going to be. What would you call a normal inventory for a cow-calf operation in your area? Do you carry a full year's worth of inventory all the time? A year and a half, 2 years?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it depends on how close you were to a recent drought like this. So I know that's a broad answer. To start it off, you're in a drought when you get snow and ice in the Southern Plains like we've gotten some this winter, and people are actually excited about it because it is a little bit of moisture. So that's when you're in a drought. So to answer that question, it was interesting. I can remember back in 2015, 16, we had good rains in most of the region, and there was hay. Hay was plentiful. It was stacked in every fence row you could find. It just seemed like the price of hay was cheap, and people got maybe not as aggressive with putting up the hay they should have. And so, the general rule with them, you always want to have, if you're a rancher, you want to have a year's supply of hay kind of sitting there. Well, we had hay in every fence row. And so maybe you didn't bale the amount of hay that you should have. You fast forward, it kind of cleans out, and then you get into a drought situation like this, and you're short of hay. And so, in my opinion, in the Southern Plains, when you have good hay or good grass sitting there, the advantage of baling it lets you capture it right there. Because I talked about the majority of our customers are cow-calf guys. To go invest in 30-40% more mama cows for a short amount of time just really doesn't fit into a lot of those producers. So for you to go capture and harvest that, that crop at the best stage you can have and store it, to me, that's the advantage of putting up hay. And, what the hay is if you baled it off your own place. And so you have the advantage of knowing where it came from. And as you get, further from droughts, people get not as aggressive with that. But, if you're talking, I would say for the next several years, producers are going to bale all they can to make sure they don't end up in this situation again.
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
From the hayfield to the feed bunk, look to Vermeer. You've got livestock to feed. You know about our lineup of mowers, rakes, and balers. Now, we're taking our legacy to the bunk. Introducing the Vermeer lineup of vertical mixers and feed wagons. 20 different makes and models to fit your operation. Durable, long-lasting components and accurate scales with Bluetooth capability. From the field to the feed bunk, look to Vermeer.
So what I ran into, and I worked for a large agricultural lender, and I talked to one of the old-time loan officers, and it was kind of the second year of a drought in Montana. I asked, how are these cattle producers doing on their feed inventory? And his response was really simple. He says, if Grandpa's still around, they're carrying 2 years worth of inventory and they're doing okay. They haven't had to buy very much, but they are drawing down on their buffer stocks, right? And if Grandpa's gone and it's the millennial running the operation and he's running leaner because he doesn't have a lot of capital or something like that, they might be hurting a little bit more because they haven't put as much into inventory and now they're having to buy really expensive hay. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is the closer you are to drought or the more experience that you have where maybe you've seen 2 or 3 of them, you might carry a little bit more inventory than you would if you've gone through some good times.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Everybody knows the negative effects of a drought. I mean, it's terrible. You never wish it. Nobody likes it. But there's some light at the end of the tunnel. From a perspective, the Southern Plains here of how we put up hay, it kind of brings everybody back to a 0 point because you sell out of hay, you feed all the hay you've got. So there's not that hay sitting in the fence row, like I talked about earlier. And so what that really does is it puts a premium on your hay crop. And that's the biggest struggle that, we've seen in the round bale business for sure, is that, compared to, the row crop guys, there's limited specs on hay. And what's the difference in good hay and poor quality hay? We talk about feed analysis, and that's great. But it seems like, hay is either worth nothing or everything. And it's at one extreme or the other. When you look at, light at the end of the tunnel of, hey, we're coming out of a drought, there's no hay left, that, any hay you could bale is going to be a premium value. So either you need it to feed your cattle, so you have to go bale it to offset the cost of buying it, or you put up hay, to sell to the public. That yes, while the input costs are high, fertilizer's still high, equipment cost is high, but it's a lot easier to pencil that out. I mean, using round numbers here, at $100 or $150 round bales versus $50 round bales. And so that's what I, tell people that, while it's tough while you're in it, once you get out of it, it does help raise the value of the price of hay. And it does make it a lot easier to pencil that out of investing, putting some fertilizer down, investing in your hay crop to allow you to put that premium product up.
Couldn't agree more. The only additional thing that I'd layer into that is you can create a little bit of a whipsaw effect when your inventory gets out of whack. When you're really short, you can get really long and push the prices down temporarily. But I think to your point, if we're talking a 3 to 5 year timeline, it really resets the market and gets you back to a little bit more normal.
Couldn't agree with you more. When you look at it for hay or cattle, what drought on cattle drives the prices down. But when you come out of a drought, our supply is low. So I kind of compare this back to 2011 when we had a drought here in Texas. Everybody sold out. Well, 2012 prices came up because there wasn't enough cattle in the market, and it takes so long, for those replacement heifers, to get those calves back into the cycle, that you look up and it was good cattle prices from 12, 13, 14, 15, even into 16. And so while I'm not going to sit here and guarantee the market's going to be good for the next 3 to 5 years, but it definitely looks like it's going to be favorable, and that cattle prices are set up to be favorable along with hay prices. And so while you want to come in there, like you're talking about, flooding the market with a lot of hay, I think a lot of those producers, surely the calf guy, he's not going to sell any hay because he's going to make sure he gets his 1 year supply back. So for the next several years, the only really hay in the market is going to be the excess hay, or the guy that just bales and sells hay, for his living. And so that's going to keep the supply, I think, tamped down enough to keep those prices at a premium, which is good for everybody.
I have a couple of resources here for producers. If you go to farmers.gov, you can search A Producer's Guide to Drought. Fantastic content here, whether we're talking about the Livestock Indemnity Program, the Livestock Forage Disaster Program. There's a whole alphabet soup of programs here available through the USDA, and if you visit with your Farm Service Agency, you can certainly find that. All that information out there. They're completely happy to help you. That's what they're there for. The other component is drought can be really financially stressful, right? As we think about mental health resources for farmers, the Farm Aid Hotline is a great place to start.
Yeah, I would say, your FCS office is your first biggest resource. For an example, it's different state to state, but I know here in Texas this past year, the freight assistance through the FCS office was tremendous, and that allowed us to kind of get outside of our normal circles and maybe afford some of that high-priced hay and offset the trucking cost, because a lot of times the
trucking was more than the hay.
Exactly. Yeah. You get to a tipping point there where the load of hay is equal to the trucking, and it gets to where it's just not feasible. But when you have resources like the FCS office helping out with that, I mean, that's what saved a lot of farmers and ranchers in this part of the world, because it allowed us to go out and find what good hay was left out there, and bring it back at a more manageable cost. Yeah. Sure.
The only other thing that I'd like to add when we're talking about trucking hay is bale density. I have a West Coast bias where we sell hay by the ton pretty regular, and pounds per cubic foot. I'm going to get up on my soapbox for a minute. If you're thinking about shipping hay, the denser the bale, the more you fit on the truck, and the less you're paying per pound or per ton, or even on a per bale basis, I suppose, for that trucking. So just something to keep in mind if you're having to go out and ship hay, and you have the choice between two equal quality hay products, and one has a denser bale, the one that's denser is going to be cheaper to get that hay moved.
If you could figure out how to convince producers in the Southern Plains how to sell round bales by the ton, I would love that. It just seems to be
it's one of the structural problems we have in the hay industry.
It is, and everybody kind of thinks a bale of hay is a bale of hay. So agree with that statement. But yes, when you really look at what you're getting, and I think that from the topic of drought that we've been talking about here, it allows people to really do their research more, because you've got more time, and it costs a lot more. And when the price gets up there enough, people start trying to justify it and pencil it out. And like perfect example, like you just said there, if you have two, equal quality bales of hay, the one that wins out should be the one that's more dense, that has more, pounds per foot in that bale. And
Yep.
so, we have got several products at Vermeer. We try to focus on that, of putting more hay in a bale of hay to get that cost, per pound down.
And then I guess I forgot one more resource, and maybe this is a little bit of closing the barn door after the horses got out, but pasture, rangeland, and forage crop insurance is something that's available to insure against drought conditions. So that would be something that you get through your crop insurance agent.
And I would say a lot of times, in my experience, the cost of that is pretty cheap to what you cover. At least in my experience. So I would highly recommend looking into that, because a lot of times it is pennies on the dollar of investment versus what you get out of it. Yeah,
I completely agree. That's really the only federal crop insurance policy that's effective for hay producers. I guess whole farm revenue is another one that would probably work well in those situations. Just some options out there, giving producers vocabulary to Google the things and talk to a crop insurance agent.
Yes, I agree with that. To close it up, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We looked at the drought, map for the Southern Plains, and while we are, we're in a terrible drought, last summer and in the fall, we've had some decent rains this winter, and as we come in the spring and it starts to green up, I feel like we're at least headed the right direction. And everybody psychological is getting in a better mindset that, it will rain again. We all know it will. And I just think that doing your homework and making sure you're prepared and ready, from having your equipment ready to go to the field from winter postseason maintenance, making sure all your equipment's ready, making sure, your fertility's right in your hay fields, and going out there and, the advantage, like we talked about, you're going to have a premium product because there's not going to be any hay left in the market. So, really put the pencil to investing in your hay this year. I really think it's going to pay off.
I think that's good and sage advice. Thank you very much, Boyd, for joining the podcast today. There's good resources out there to help producers, and a lot of these thought processes are the right things to go through.
Yes, sir, John. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to it in the future.
Thank you again to Vermeer for sponsoring the podcast, and thank you to Nick Palmieri at Palmieri Studios for doing all of our audio work, and thank you to Jessica Palmieri for being our social media coordinator.